Hey, Dewey, look! It's Nicole Kidman! Yeah, well, the Academy would disagree with you. Welcome to Teacup for One. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees. And friends, Oscar season 2022 is upon us, which means I am proud to announce the Teacup for One Oscar Movie Marathon. I might have mentioned it before, but we are planning to make the Teacup Movie Club a regular occurrence here on the channel throughout this year, and our first movie marathon is all dedicated to the Academy Awards. So, once a week between now and the actual award show happening, we're going to be coming together for a live discussion of one of the Oscar-nominated films. And for the movies that super interest me, I'm also going to be doing a review right here on the channel starting today with a film that wasn't actually nominated for Best Picture or anything really aside from a bunch of acting awards. Being the Ricardos. And I think it's very telling that this movie was nominated for nothing except for the acting. And even then, there are some choices I disagree with, but that's what we're going to discuss right here today. Being the Ricardos was written and directed by Aaron Sorkin, who's perhaps best known for being a writer, so some of his most prolific works have been things like, no, not Air Force One, I was going to say Air Force One. What's the Tom Hanks? No, Tom Cruise. What's the Tom Cruise movie where Jack Nicholson screams, "You can't handle the truth" in his face? A Few Good Men. He wrote A Few Good Men, but more recently he also wrote The Social Network, which was probably one of his biggest hits in recent years and also one of my favorite movies ever. He made his directorial debut a few years ago with Molly's Game, which I saw and did not love. And then last year he had The Trial of Chicago 7, which I didn't see, so I have no opinion on it. And now he's back. I know. Oh, you liked it? Okay, I'll give it a shot. And now he's back with Being the Ricardos. Being the Ricardos takes place during a week of production on one of the greatest television shows of all time, I Love Lucy. Fight me if you disagree. Specifically, it takes place during the week when there was all of this controversy surrounding Lucille Ball's ties to communism. So the movie kind of delves into that alongside showing us the difficulties in Lucy and Desi's relationships, and it's kind of all focused on Lucy trying to save her marriage, but there's also a lot of conflicting directions with this film. I don't know. I don't think it's a great movie. I think it's a decent movie that had a great concept that could have been so much better. And when you can see the potential of something being incredible and then it's not, that kind of makes it, in some ways, more disappointing than just watching a film that's outright bad. But we're going to talk about the things first that are good about this film, or at least good according to the people who vote for the Academy Award nominations, the performances. This is one of the most nominated films for acting of the entire award season. And just for context, it's not nominated for anything else. The Academy is basically saying, Sorkin, we didn't like your movie, but you cast talented actors. And we're going to talk about those actors. Starting with one that was snubbed by the Academy, which I think is an injustice, and it was for the Best Supporting Actress Oscar. And I just want to question, who is picking the nominees for the Best Supporting Actress Oscar? Because they also snubbed Kathryn Hunter in Joel Coen's Macbeth. There were so many great performances that just aren't being acknowledged to the level that I think they need to be acknowledged at. Though, to be fair, I haven't really seen any of the other films that have the performances from the nominees for Best Supporting Actress, except for Arianda DeBose, and she's gonna win. We all know that. But still, give some acknowledgement to Kathryn Hunter. But because we're talking about Being the Ricardos today, give some acknowledgement to Nina Arianda as Vivian Vance. It is just so in keeping with the legacy of Vivian Vance that she's the one person who wasn't nominated for the Oscar. And I don't mean Vivian Vance, I mean Nina Arianda playing Vivian Vance. I think Nina Arianda as Vivian Vance puts in an incredible performance. One that I would argue is more award-worthy than what we saw from Javier Bardem and even J.K. Simmons. I think Nina Arianda struck this absolutely brilliant balance of emulating her person, because the struggle with all of the characters in this film is that they are real people, specifically real television personalities. So the big challenge that every actor in this movie had to overcome, for the most part, was sort of matching them and matching their personalities and their traits while still making the characters their own. But just as somebody who grew up watching I Love Lucy, as somebody who knows these characters so well, I just fully felt like I was watching Vivian Vance as Ethel Mertz. Ethel Mertz. It's Ethel Mertz. And as a further testament to Nina Arianda's performance, I think the role of Vivian Vance is horribly written. I think it's almost like one step away from being problematically misogynistic. But she still made it compelling. She still made it a performance that I wanted to watch, and a performance that I felt was one of the most engaging in the entire film. But I guess the Academy disagreed with me, and that's why they're on the Academy, and that's why I'm on YouTube, so I'm just... Next, we have J.K. Simmons as William Frawley, aka Fred Mertz. And J.K. Simmons is always great in everything he's in. There's never going to be a bad J.K. Simmons performance. But I think him getting the Best Supporting Actor nomination, that just feels too easy. With this nomination, it almost feels like he's becoming the next Christoph Waltz. The guy who, when he plays a supporting role, the Academy will just say, okay, well, it's J.K. Simmons in a supporting role, give him the Oscar nomination. Just kind of like Meryl Streep. If she's in a role that's in a movie that's considered worthy by the Academy, she'll just get the nomination because it's going to be an undeniably good performance. And that was what we saw with J.K. Simmons. It was an undeniably good performance. But was it the best of the year? I don't think so. And I also don't think he emulated William Frawley. Although this is a little bit more of a Matt issue than it is a J.K. Simmons performance issue. This is kind of what I was getting at when I was talking about Nina Arianda as Vivian Vance. I personally have a hard time watching established celebrities playing other established celebrities. And it's not that I didn't know who Nina Arianda was. In fact, I saw her on Broadway in her Tony Award-winning performance in Venus in Fur, but I'm not used to seeing her on screen all that much. So it's possible that that also helped me accept her as Vivian Vance, as opposed to J.K. Simmons, who I had a hard time accepting as William Frawley, because I just kept seeing J.K. Simmons. Now, I do think it is perfect casting, but when you have two people that are so well known, especially people that are well known in either the film or television industry, you sort of have to contend with the fact that everybody knows what they look like, everybody knows what they sound like for both the actor and the person that they're portraying. And when you have somebody that is so similar, as in some ways J.K. Simmons is to William Frawley, it's easier to notice the differences between the two, if that makes sense. Anyway, I think what I'm saying here is J.K. Simmons, good performance, but I didn't see Bill Frawley. Okay, and that said, let's talk about Javier Bardem as Desi Arnaz. Okay, now I do need to say, disclaimer, much like J.K. Simmons, anything Javier Bardem does is going to be good. We know this. But I think he was just so unfortunately miscast as Desi for a lot of things that were out of his control. And some things that were within his control. But when I say out of his control, again, maybe this is just a bad thing, but because the first movie I saw Javier Bardem in was No Country for Old Men, he scares me. And Javier Bardem will probably never not scare me. And I think he's the perfect person to, play the Bond villain, like in Skyfall. But Desi Arnaz, okay, I didn't know Desi Arnaz. I just want to make that clear. So maybe Javier Bardem put in a performance that was exactly like Desi Arnaz was in real life. But just from what I've seen on screen in I Love Lucy, and from what I've heard watching interviews with Lucy Arnaz Jr. and Desi Arnaz Jr., and even just people who knew Desi Arnaz, he was reportedly the most charming man in the room, which is something they even mention and allude to in this film. Reportedly, Desi was hilarious. He was funnier than Lucy. Lucy's comedy was the result of methodical thinking and rehearsal. Desi was just somebody who had this natural comedic light to him. He had impeccable comedic timing. Lucy Arnaz Jr. even says everything she learned about comedy came from her dad. Yes, he was a brilliant businessman, but he also had that element of lightness and of humor and of frivolity to him. And I do think that that is essential to sort of the rift that existed in his relationship with Lucy. But Javier Bardem is not a light and funny guy. I think he was at his most Javier Bardem during that moment when he said, "If you condescend to me again, I will stick my hand down your throat and pull out your organs." I was like, there he is. That's the Javier we know and love. So yeah, I just don't think Javier's natural energy matches Desi Arnaz's natural energy. There were some performance things I think he could have done. I think he was grounding his voice in the wrong place for Desi Arnaz. You know, it was a bit deeper, a bit more resonant. It was more, Lucy, I'm home. Whereas Desi had a bit more of a nasal quality when he was speaking. So instead of, Lucy, I'm home, he could have turned it into, Lucy, I'm home. Just a little tweak like that would have made him a little bit more Desi. And I think the biggest problem with his casting wasn't the voice, well, actually I do think the biggest problem was how scary Javier Bardem is, but let's put that aside for a second. He's 20 years too old. In 1952, 1953, Desi Arnaz was my age. And I'm not going to tell you how old that is, but do I look the same age as Javier Bardem? Don't answer that. I'm not. Personally, I think character age is an important tool for informing character relationships, which is something that I spoke about a little bit at length in my video about Lady Macbeth and Mr. Macbeth in my Shakespeare fan theory episode, Who Was the Father of Lady Macbeth's Child? Please check out that video because I really liked it, but not a lot of people did. In real life, Desi Arnaz was in his early to mid-30s, married to a woman who was in her early 40s. I think that age gap was another crucial factor in the dynamic of their relationship and another contributing factor to the rift that ultimately ended their marriage. And we don't see that reflected between Javier and Nicole. Does Javier Bardem put in a good performance? Sure. Is it a good performance as Desi Arnaz that serves the story? I'd say not so much. So, who would I have cast? Like, aside from me? Oscar Isaac. Just imagine this movie if Oscar Isaac was playing Desi. Everything could have been the same. If you just plug in Oscar Isaac, it's possible that this movie could have gotten a Best Picture nomination. It probably wouldn't have happened, but it's possible. Alright, and now let's talk about the star performance. Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball. I'll tell you right now, it could be because I had such dirt low expectations, but I didn't mind her performance. In fact, I kind of loved her performance. Loved might be a strong word. What's halfway between liked and loved? Because that's where I stand on Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball. But let's get the obvious out of the way. Nicole Kidman as Lucy Ricardo is pretty cringy. There's all this talk throughout the movie about how Lucille Ball has a great voice, how she has all this natural comedic ability, which we all know is true in a historical context, but then from what we're seeing of Nicole Kidman as Lucille Ball, as Lucy Ricardo, it's not there. It's kind of comparable, I think, to watching a non-singer in a musical. That's kind of how I felt about Nicole Kidman doing Lucy Ricardo's physical comedy bits and even doing the Lucy voice. I know there was a lot of talk with people saying that Debra Messing should have been the actor chosen to play Lucille Ball because of her impeccable Lucy Ricardo impersonation. And in that respect, I do understand where Aaron Sorkin was going, because he wasn't looking to cast somebody who could do an impersonation. He wasn't looking to cast somebody to play Lucy Ricardo. He was casting someone to play Lucille Ball. And the amount that we see of her in performance as Lucy Ricardo is so minuscule that I do think he made the right choice. He went with somebody who could portray the person behind the character. From an emotional perspective, I thought her acting was phenomenal. There was all kinds of subtlety and nuance, and just the scenes when she was taking charge of the entire set, she was in control. She was so compelling. I could not take my eyes off of her. And in terms of the character she crafted, taking into consideration voice, physicality, and just the energy that she was emitting, I didn't have the same problem with her that I had with J.K. Simmons and Javier Bardem. You know, I didn't watch her thinking that's Nicole Kidman. I think she was successful in her performance the same way that Nina Arianda was successful. Like, she emulated her person beautifully. And it was a person that I found engaging, a person I wanted to watch, and a person that I was rooting for. So then when it came time towards the end of the film for her to actually shoot the episode of I Love Lucy, and we finally saw her in full hair, makeup, costume, everything, that was so satisfying. Because I felt like I was finally, for the first time, seeing Lucy Ricardo. The Lucy that I love. And from the past 2 hours of film, I had a better understanding of who that was in the context of Lucille Ball's life. So in that respect, I do think the film worked. I had to watch it more than once to fully appreciate it, but I do enjoy the movie. I think the performances are the strongest thing, and the weakest things, I hate to say, are really the writing and the direction, which were both done by Aaron Sorkin. And it hurts me to say because I love Aaron Sorkin's work. But this movie, to me, I think where it suffers is that it's caught between trying to be a lot of different things. In some ways, it's trying to be a workplace drama, which, if they just committed to that, absolutely, I would have loved to watch that movie. Just giving us the trajectory of one production week on Isle of Lucy and showing us like the pressure cooker of that environment with everyone's personal lives conflicting with like the political dramas alongside balancing that with the creative process. 100%. Give me that movie. I would love to watch that movie. On the other hand, it's also trying to be a Lucille Ball biopic, but much like Desi to Lucy, it's not committing to it, okay? They were giving us all of these flashbacks to moments in Lucy's life and career, which, yes, of course, I found interesting, but they weren't serving the plot or moving anything forward or giving us pieces of information that we didn't already have or pieces of information that we necessarily needed. Again, yes, give me a Lucille Ball biopic, but commit to it. And if anyone is like craving a Lucille Ball biopic, there was an incredible one made for TV back in the early 2000s starring Rachel York as Lucy. I can't remember what it was called. Maybe it was the Lucille Ball story. Maybe it was just called Lucy. Maybe, I can't remember. Look it up, because that's a well-made Lucille Ball biopic, which is what this is not. Now, there is one way I think all of those Lucy life flashbacks could have worked, and that's if we had the same thing for Desi. Because then, this film could have thrived as the marriage story and the relationship drama that it's trying to be. Because, just think about it. The core of this story is that it's about a married couple that has a dysfunctional relationship in real life that has a tragically perfect relationship in their on-screen life. And we kind of get to see all of the relationship dynamics from Lucy's perspective. And we also get to see where Lucy is coming from fairly objectively, because all of those flashbacks are giving us an objective look at how she got to be where she is, at how she built her relationship with Desi from her perspective. Everything we learn about Desi is subjective information from other people. Everything we see of Desi is just in passing from Lucille's perspective. Everything we learn about Desi is just other people talking about him, like Bill Frawley saying, yes, he loves America, but at his heart, he's still a Cuban man. Like, he has his pride, he has all of this stuff. I never thought I would be in a position where I wanted to see a Desi Arnaz film, because Lucy is always the one who's taking the spotlight, and the movie does address that, but it also gives us little pieces of information that I didn't know about Desi Arnaz that were fascinating, like what a brilliant businessman he was, like the fact that he was the natural comedian, the entire story about him coming to America from Cuba and all the drama surrounding that. This is a person whose life story I want to see now, and I think this movie missed a massive opportunity by not giving us the same objective look at Desi's life as it did with Lucy's life. Because if the movie gave us those two stories, then at the intersection, we could see and understand why the marriage didn't work and understand the true tragedy that Lucy is feeling in having to be the Ricardos. But it didn't give us that. And it was such a tease because it could have been such a well-made film. And as it stands, it's just a decent film with some incredible performances. And I do need to see some of the other nominated films, but for now, I'm Team Nicole Kidman for the 2022 Best Actress Oscar. I said it. Do you disagree? Let me know, because we are going to be having a live show where you can voice this opinion. It's going to be taking place this Wednesday, February 16th, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here. We are going to be joined by some incredible guests. Don't miss it. But for now, friends, this concludes yet another episode of Teacup for One. Let me know in the comment section down below, have you seen Being the Ricardos, and what did you think? And if you want to be the first to know when I release more videos about the Oscars or just about movies in general, sometimes Disney, sometimes Shakespeare, sometimes Funko Pops, sometimes cats, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't subscribed already. And if you haven't subscribed already, it's the easiest thing in the world. All you have to do is click on my face. Thanks for joining me again today, everyone. My name is Matt, and I have 2 degrees, and that's the Teacup for 1. Go away.